If you have ever felt like your English will never sound natural, if you avoid conversations because your brain freezes, your tongue shakes, and your confidence disappears, then this video might be the most important 20 minutes you watch this year. Because today, I will share the real promise I made to myself in Denmark, the promise that saved my motivation, rebuilt my confidence, and changed how I train English forever. Dark opening, lost motivation. Have you ever felt like your entire brain turned into a broken Wi-Fi modem the moment someone asked you a simple question in English, and you knew the answer, but your mouth refused to cooperate? That was me, standing outside a cold Danish supermarket in winter, holding a bag of carrots like it was evidence from a crime scene, because I didn't know how to ask for a different size in English without sounding like a confused tourist. It sounds silly now, but in that moment my confidence shattered like thin ice under heavy boots. I wasn't just embarrassed, I felt small, like my worth had been silently downgraded just because my English wasn't smooth, natural, or quick enough. People often think learning English is just vocabulary, grammar, apps, and time. No, it's identity. It's pride. It's the ability to respond without fear. Somewhere deep inside, I believed that if I couldn't speak like others, I didn't belong with them. The brain is dramatic like that. It loves turning minor language mistakes into psychological horror movies. And Denmark wasn't a place where I could hide behind my native language. English was everywhere, like invisible air pressure reminding me, everyone can speak except you. I felt like my dreams had accidentally boarded a wrong flight and never arrived. There were nights I wanted to uninstall everything. YouTube English channels, motivational quotes, even my goals. I Googled, maybe English is not for everyone, as if the internet would kindly excuse me from trying. But here's the part nobody tells you. Your English problem isn't stupidity. It's emotional exhaustion mixed with perfection pressure. Your brain isn't lazy, it's scared. According to cognitive psychology, when your brain detects possible humiliation, it shifts into survival mode, blocking fluency the same way it blocks fun facts during panic moments. So while you think I'm dumb, the brain is whispering, I'm protecting you. It took me years to admit that I wasn't struggling with English. I was struggling with shame. And shame is heavier than grammar. I realized that if I didn't change the way I felt about English, I would never change the way I spoke it. That moment outside the supermarket wasn't a failure. It was a warning. A sign that if I kept avoiding conversations one day, English wouldn't just be a skill I lacked. It would be a life I missed. Sometimes rock bottom is the perfect classroom, cold, silent, and brutally honest. Denmark culture shock. You might think Denmark is just about fairy tale castles, bicycles, Vikings, and Lego, but let me tell you a secret. The real shock was not the weather, not the expensive coffee, not even the long dark winters. It was how effortlessly everyone spoke English. Imagine walking into a tiny bakery, preparing your slow, careful sentence in English like a fragile origami swan, and the cashier suddenly replies in fluent, Netflix-level English with perfect timing, humor, and confidence. Your brain doesn't even have time to load. It feels like showing up to a marathon wearing flip-flops while everyone else is sponsored by Nike. There was something fascinating and terrifying about Danish communication culture. People spoke directly. No sugar coating, no long explanation, no unnecessary drama. Their English sounded like they were born with subtitles turned on. Meanwhile, I was still mentally translating every sentence from my native language, editing grammar, autocorrecting pronunciation, and rehearsing emotions all at the same time. It felt like trying to play piano, do maths, and perform heart surgery while smiling politely. And don't get me wrong, nobody laughed at me, nobody was rude, nobody criticized. The real pressure wasn't from them. It was from me. That inner voice. Why can they speak so naturally and I can't? Psychologists call it social comparison anxiety. When you measure your worth by someone else's skills and end up creating a fear-based identity. In Denmark, this anxiety had unlimited Wi-Fi signal point. One of my most unforgettable moments happened on a city bus in Aarhus. A tourist couple asked me for directions. Yes, me, the wrong person to ask. And in my panic, my English turned into a weird soup of short words, broken grammar, and Google Translate energy. They smiled kindly, thanked me, and walked away. Then the elderly Danish lady next to me answered for them in flawless English, with humor, tone, and even small cultural tips. She spoke like BBC radio, and I sat there feeling like a frozen potato. Here's the interesting scientific part. When your survival brain activates, your prefrontal cortex, the part used to form sentences, gets temporarily blocked. So it's not that you don't know English. It's that your brain refuses to access the file during panic mode. It's practically saying, we're trying not to die, not trying to sound smart. That was the moment I realized learning English abroad wouldn't magically fix anything. Location doesn't build fluency, training does. Denmark didn't make me confident. It forced me to face my insecurity like a mirror I could no longer avoid. Culture shock wasn't a problem. It was a loud invitation. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be ready. The silent pain. There's a strange kind of pain that doesn't make noise, doesn't leave bruises, and doesn't show up on X-ray results. The pain of wanting to speak but staying silent. It's like being trapped inside your own thoughts, watching words swim behind invisible glass, unable to break through. You smile, you nod, you pretend everything is fine while deep down, your confidence slowly leaks away like air from a forgotten bicycle tire. In Denmark, that pain became my daily background music. Soft, invisible, but exhausting. What nobody warned me about was the psychological tax of speaking a language you haven't fully mastered. Every time I opened my mouth, it felt like stepping onto a stage without rehearsing. My breathing got shallow, my shoulders tense, and my brain pulled the fire alarm. Instead of forming sentences, my mind produced dramatic survival messages like, "Don't speak. You'll embarrass yourself." Again. It wasn't the English that scared me. It was the idea of being misunderstood. Humans are wired to fear misunderstanding because our brains interpret it as social rejection. And rejection triggers the same neural pathways as physical pain. Yes, your fear of speaking English activates similar brain chemistry to breaking a bone. Crazy but true. I remember sitting in a cozy Danish living room during a small gathering. Everyone was talking about childhood memories, funny mistakes, travel stories, and dream projects. I wanted to join so badly. I even had something meaningful to say. But while they laughed, I rehearsed the same sentence 6 times in my head, scared that my pronunciation would sound weird, or my grammar too basic. By the time I gathered enough courage, the topic had already changed. So I swallowed my voice like a bitter pill and nodded politely, hoping no one would notice my silence. Ironically, silence hurt more than mistakes ever could. According to behavioral psychology, when we repeatedly avoid something due to fear, the brain learns that avoidance equals safety. This forms a neural habit loop that makes the behavior automatically repeat. So the more I avoided speaking English, the more my brain believed silence was correct, rewarding me with temporary comfort but long-term regret. My problem wasn't pronunciation. My prison was self-judgment that I realized something shocking. People weren't judging me, I was judging me. Others were curious, patient, and supportive. The only person turning my English into a weapon was myself. The silent pain was not about lack of words. It was about lack of permission. Permission to sound imperfect, permission to learn in public, permission to be a beginner without shame. And here's the brutal truth. Confidence is not the result of speaking well. Confidence is the permission to speak imperfectly. Tiny spark of change. Imagine your motivation as a small candle in a windy city. Some days it flickers bravely, and some days it looks like it's about to die forever. That was exactly how my English journey felt in Denmark. But one ordinary afternoon, something tiny, almost invisible, changed everything. I was watching a Danish child trying to speak English with his father at a public library. His sentences were broken, his pronunciation chaotic, his grammar on vacation, but his face, glowing with excitement. The father didn't correct him harshly, didn't laugh, didn't compare him to other kids. Instead, he treated every imperfect attempt like a victory. Suddenly, it hit me like a mental thunderbolt. Kids never wait for perfection before speaking, so why do adults? I realized I was learning English like an accountant, not like a human. I was chasing grammar accuracy like chasing receipts for tax season. I was scared of mistakes as if they were unpaid bills. Meanwhile, children learn by curiosity, emotional connection, and fearless repetition. According to neuroscientists, the brain learns language fastest when relaxed, engaged, and emotionally connected, not when stressed, embarrassed, or anxiously self-monitoring. In other words, fluency is closer to play than pressure. I didn't need a new textbook, I needed a new mindset. That night, I did something small but revolutionary. I wrote one sentence in my notebook. I allow myself to speak badly before I speak well. Sounds simple, but that sentence unlocked a mental prison door I didn't even know existed. Because the real breakthrough wasn't speaking perfect English. It was accepting imperfect English as a normal stage of growth. Your brain doesn't learn language by saving face. It learns through exposure, imitation, and repeated output. The same way you once learned to walk, fall, get up, then try again. That I began creating tiny daily habits that were almost too easy to fail. Listening to slow English while cooking, reading children's stories out loud, shadowing movie lines 3 times a day, recording one short audio message to myself, and speaking to objects like a friendly crazy person. Hello cup, you look empty. Today let me fix your loneliness. It sounded ridiculous, but it rewired my brain to treat English as something alive, not something scary. The most surprising part? When you remove shame, language becomes entertainment. My pronunciation improved because my mouth finally practiced without fear. My confidence grew because I stopped waiting for applause. And slowly, something magical happened. Learning English stopped feeling like hard work and started feeling like breathing. Maybe the question is not, how good is your English? Maybe the real question is, are you brave enough to sound bad while getting better? The marriage vow to myself. You might laugh at this, but one evening in my small Danish apartment, surrounded by silence, hot tea, and my own frustration, I suddenly realized that learning English felt exactly like being in a complicated relationship, full of emotions, expectations, arguments, silent treatments, breakups, comebacks, and tiny magical moments. My biggest mistake was treating English like a temporary project instead of a lifelong partner. You don't finish a marriage and you don't finish English either. So I took a deep breath, opened my notebook, and wrote something that changed my entire journey. This is my marriage vow to English. Here's what I wrote with my shaky hand. I promise I will not treat you only when I'm motivated. I will stay even when I'm bored, frustrated, tired, or slow. I will not compare you with others. I will not demand perfection from you or myself. I will keep showing up, even with messy sentences and funny grammar. I will not leave you because leaving you means leaving my future. When I finished writing, I didn't feel like a student anymore. I felt like a partner. And suddenly, English stopped being a monster and became my long-term teammate. Psychologists tell us that consistency beats intensity in every learning field. The human brain doesn't grow from dramatic study sessions once a week. It grows from tiny repetition that builds neural pathways like strong marriage roots. The brain becomes fluent not through passion bursts, but through stability, the same way a marriage becomes strong through ordinary days, not honeymoon highlights. That single mindset shift became the strongest motivation system I ever had, because once you turn something into a commitment, quitting stops being an option. From that moment on, I spoke to English like a real person. I'm here today even if I'm tired. I sound terrible, but I'm staying. I don't know how to say this perfectly, but I'm trying. And guess what? My progress accelerated faster than in all previous years combined. Not because I studied harder, but because I stopped emotionally divorcing English whenever I felt disappointed. The real turning point was understanding this universal truth. Fluency is not a talent, it's loyalty. Anyone can start learning English, but not everyone stays long enough to become fluent. So if you are listening now, maybe you also need to marry your dream, not just date it casually. Maybe you need a vow, not a wish. Maybe it's time to whisper into your notebook. From today, you and I, no more breaking up. The funny training system. Picture your brain like an old computer running too many tabs. You're trying to speak English while your mind is secretly loading. Grammar rules, pronunciation stress, vocabulary files, embarrassing memories, and that one sentence your teacher once corrected in front of the whole class. No wonder your tongue freezes. Your brain is basically buffering like a 2005 YouTube video on cafe Wi-Fi. So I needed a training system that felt natural, human, and funny enough that my brain wouldn't switch into panic mode. That's how my homemade, native-like slow training system was born, not from a textbook, but from desperate survival mixed with comedy energy. The first tool was slow input bathing. I treated English like background oxygen instead of a school subject. I played slow podcasts while brushing my teeth, listened to calm storytelling while riding the bus in Aarhus, and even used English nature sounds with whispered affirmations before sleep. Neuroscience calls this passive neural soaking, where the brain absorbs patterns without active pressure, similar to how you learn song lyrics without studying them. Slowly, English became familiar, not foreign. The second tool was shadowing with emotion, not robotic repetition. I didn't just copy words, I copied feelings. If the speaker laughed, I laughed. If they whispered, I whispered. If they used sarcasm, I became a comic villain. According to research, emotional mimicry activates mirror neurons, turning listening into internal pronunciation practice. My neighbors probably thought I was rehearsing for a movie, but honestly it worked. The third tool was micro-speaking sessions, only 30 to 90 seconds but daily and unavoidable. I didn't wait for grammar perfection. I just talked to myself like a sitcom character. Hello fridge, today you look extremely empty. Are you on a diet? Sounds crazy, but it builds fluency faster than silent thinking. The brain learns through spoken output, not silent correctness. The fourth tool was a note system that doesn't hurt. Instead of memorizing long vocabulary lists, I collected tiny useful phrases like kind of, to be honest, long story short, and I might be wrong but. These are linguistic cheat codes, small keys that unlock big confidence. Because natives don't speak with complex words, they speak with connected small phrases that sound natural. Finally, the fifth tool was kind self-talk. No more I'm stupid. No more everyone is better. I replaced those thoughts with lines like, I'm training, not failing. My brain is updating, not broken. Fluency is downloading, please wait. So if you ever feel stuck, remember this. Your English doesn't need to be perfect to sound human. It needs to be practiced like breathing, laughing, and living. Unexpected breakthroughs. There's something magical that happens when you stop obsessing over perfection and start showing up like a curious scientist. Breakthroughs never arrive with dramatic background music. They sneak in quietly, disguised as normal days. One of my earliest breakthroughs happened at a supermarket checkout in Aarhus. The cashier asked, "Do you want the receipt?" And instead of freezing, translating, rehearsing, panicking, or smiling awkwardly, I simply said, "No, thank you. I'll keep it digital." It was a tiny sentence, microscopic, almost meaningless, but my brain celebrated like I had just given a TED Talk at Harvard. That's when I learned a priceless truth. Progress is measured in comfort, not complexity. Another unexpected moment happened at the doctor's clinic. Usually medical vocabulary feels like alien language even in your native tongue. But that day when I tried to describe my symptoms in English, something surprising happened. I spoke slowly, calmly, using simple phrases like, "It feels heavy here," "The pain comes and goes," and "It's uncomfortable when I breathe deeply." The doctor understood me perfectly, nodded, asked follow-up questions, and everything went smoothly. On the bus home, I didn't replay my mistakes. I replayed my courage. Sometimes the real breakthrough is realizing you survived the conversation without losing your identity or self-worth. But the biggest breakthrough came from a Danish neighbor. an elderly lady named Anna who always left flowers outside her door. One afternoon she invited me for tea. Normally, I would politely avoid long conversations, but something inside whispered, "This is safe. Try." We talked for almost 30 minutes. Not with perfect grammar, not with fancy vocabulary, but with laughter, pauses, and warm eyes. When I apologized about my slow English, she touched my hand gently and said, "Slow is beautiful. When you speak slowly, I listen more deeply." That sentence healed something inside me. My whole life I thought speed equaled intelligence, but maybe clarity equals connection. From that day I noticed something profound. Native speakers don't expect you to be perfect, they expect you to be real. In fact, speaking slowly made people more patient, more attentive, and more willing to help. My accent stopped being a weakness and became a story. My mistakes stopped being shame and became stepping stones. My silence slowly transformed into curiosity, and my fear became a training partner instead of a jail guard. Psychologically, breakthroughs occur when your nervous system finally trusts the environment. When safety replaces shame, fluency becomes possible. You stop speaking to impress and start speaking to connect. And ironically, that's when you sound more natural, not because your English is advanced, but because your soul is present at it. So here's the funny lesson Denmark taught me. Sometimes fluency arrives quietly through everyday conversations, not certificates, not grammar books, not perfectly planned study schedules. It grows where courage meets repetition, and where mistakes are treated like friends, not failures. Closing wisdom and challenge. After months of tiny habits, slow conversations, funny self-talk, and heartfelt vows, something remarkable happened. My English stopped feeling like a test I had to survive and started feeling like a friend I could spend time with. Walking through the streets of Copenhagen, listening to casual chats at cafes, reading signs, even small talk with neighbors no longer triggered panic. Instead, it sparked curiosity, playfulness, and connection. I realized the greatest lesson wasn't about words, grammar, or accent. It was about mindset. Treating your language journey like a committed relationship, not a fleeting hobby. Here's the deeper insight. Fluency is built on patience, self-compassion, and consistency. Science calls it neuroplasticity. Your brain literally reshapes itself with repeated practice. Each time you speak imperfectly, shadow a sentence, or read aloud, your neurons fire and wire together. Over time, the chaos of your first attempts becomes a symphony of confidence and clarity. The secret isn't speed. It's presence and persistence. The secret isn't perfection. It's permission to be human. And Denmark, with its icy winters and warm-hearted people, taught me that small, steady actions create monumental change. Now I challenge you, yes, you watching this, to take 7 days for a micro-revolution. Speak one English sentence aloud to yourself every morning. Shadow a slow podcast for 5 minutes. Write a tiny vow to your language just like I did. No pressure, no judgment, no comparison. Just show up. That's all your brain needs to start rewiring, your confidence to start building, and your life to start transforming. The breakthroughs may seem tiny at first, but remember, a snowball starts small before it becomes an avalanche. Finally, remember this. Your English journey isn't about impressing others. It's about keeping a promise to yourself. Every word you speak, every sentence you form, is a commitment to growth, courage, and connection. Your mistakes are milestones, your slow sentences are victories, and your perseverance is the most beautiful accent you'll ever wear. Denmark didn't magically give me fluency. It gave me lessons, mirrors, and challenges that helped me marry my own effort and stay loyal to it.